You dare show your face here? The gate man's daughter!
I have every right to be here, sir.
Leave my daughter alone! Your daughter? She's more than I bargained for.
What do you want from me?
He arrived at the mansion with one cruel intention: make the gate man regret ever standing in his way. Rich, arrogant, and used to seeing people lower their eyes, Ethan believed humiliation was a language everyone understood. This time, he wanted an audience, but just as he prepared to destroy a poor man's dignity, someone stepped between them. A maid. Not a manager, not a powerful guest. A maid in a faded uniform, carrying a tray with trembling hands. She looked him straight in the eyes and said one sentence nobody had ever dared to say to him. The room went silent. Ethan should have fired her. Instead, her refusal to fear him unsettled him more than any insult could. Then he discovered who she was. The gate man's daughter. Suddenly, humiliating her father was no longer enough. Ethan decided to make her pay too. He gave her impossible tasks, mocked her poverty, and waited for her to break. But she didn't. Each time she walked away with her dignity intact, his anger became something he refused to name. He noticed how she bought medicine for her father, how she gave away half her food to another servant, how she smiled only when she thought no one important was watching. Then one night, Ethan overheard a conversation that shattered everything he believed about the gate man and his own family. By morning, the maid was gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Only a folded note on his desk containing a truth that could ruin his father, destroy his inheritance, and expose why she entered that mansion in the first place. Was she ever truly just a maid? What secret had her father protected for years? And when Ethan finally found her, would he choose the empire waiting for him or the poor girl he once came to humiliate? If you believe a person's worth should never be measured by their uniform, bank account, or family name, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell now. Stories like this remind us that the people society overlooks sometimes carry the greatest courage, and that pride can blind even the richest heart to the treasure standing right in front of it. Stay with this story, because what Ethan is about to discover about the maid, her father, and his own family will change everything. The black Bentley stopped so suddenly at the iron gates that gravel sprayed across the driveway. Samuel Carter did not flinch. At 62, Samuel had spent almost half his life standing beside those gates. He had welcomed senators, celebrities, investors, relatives who smiled for photographs and whispered insults when they thought the workers could not hear. He had opened the gates in storms, in snow, during funerals, weddings, scandals, and celebrations. But the man stepping from the Bentley that afternoon frightened him in a way none of those people ever had. Ethan Whitmore was home. Samuel slowly removed his cap. "Good afternoon, Mr. Whitmore." Ethan slammed the car door. He was 32 now, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Samuel earned in 6 months. 8 years in New York had sharpened him. His father's money had always given him confidence, but success had transformed that confidence into something colder. The newspapers called him brilliant. Business magazines called him ruthless. His employees, when he was not listening, called him worse. Ethan held up a hand. "What did you say to my father?" Samuel's fingers tightened around his cap. "So, don't play stupid with me." Ethan stepped closer. 2 groundskeepers nearby suddenly became very interested in trimming a hedge. "My father says you questioned his instructions concerning the West property." Samuel swallowed. "I only asked him to reconsider demolishing the old cottages until the families living there had somewhere else to go." "You asked?" "Yes, sir." Ethan smiled without warmth. "That's interesting, because according to my father, you told him the cottages didn't belong to him." Samuel's face changed. Only slightly. But Ethan saw it. And that tiny reaction told him he had found something. What did you mean by that? Samuel lowered his voice. Some things are better discussed privately. You work at my gate, Samuel. You don't decide when I deserve privacy. A distant memory moved through Ethan's mind. He was 11 years old again, standing near these same gates, crying because his mother had been taken to the hospital. His father had been away on business. Samuel had knelt in front of him, placed both hands on his shoulders, and said, "A frightened heart sees tomorrow as an enemy. Give tomorrow a chance to arrive." Ethan had forgotten those words for years. Or perhaps he had only pretended to. Now he looked at the old man and saw no comfort. Only defiance. "You're fired," Ethan said. Samuel stared at him. The hedge trimmers stopped. "Mr. Whitmore, you heard me." Ethan raised his voice deliberately. He wanted the other workers to hear. He wanted everyone to understand what happened when someone embarrassed the Whitmore family. "You have spent 34 years standing at a gate my family owns, collecting a salary my family pays, living in a cottage my family provides, and somehow you've confused proximity to wealth with ownership." Samuel's cheeks burned. "Sir, I have never confused the two." "Then perhaps poverty has made you forget your place." A tray crashed. Every head turned. A young maid stood halfway up the front steps. Broken glass glittered at her feet. She was perhaps 26, with dark brown hair pulled into a simple bun and a cream uniform that had been washed so many times the fabric had begun to fade at the elbows. Her name was Lily Carter. Ethan did not know that yet. All he knew was that she had heard him. And unlike the others, she was not looking away. She descended the steps. "Lily," Samuel whispered. The warning in his voice was unmistakable. She ignored it. Ethan stared at her. "Did you need something?" She stopped several feet away. Her hands were shaking, but her voice did not. "Yes." Ethan waited. Lily looked at her father, then directly at Ethan. A man who has to humiliate someone poor to prove he is powerful has already shown everyone how weak he is. Silence. Not ordinary silence. The kind that seemed to pull oxygen from the air. Samuel closed his eyes. One groundskeeper took a step backward. Ethan's face hardened. "Excuse me. You heard me." Lily's heart was pounding so violently she could feel it in her throat. She had promised herself she would keep quiet. For 3 months, she had kept quiet. She had polished silver while rich guests discussed people like her as if poverty were a contagious disease. She had cleaned wine stains from carpets while hearing men boast about buying companies and destroying competitors. She had swallowed insults because her father needed heart medication, and because every dollar she saved brought them closer to leaving the Whitmore estate forever. But there were some humiliations she could not watch silently. Not when the target was the man who had raised her. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. "My name is Lily Carter." Something clicked. "Carter." Ethan looked at Samuel. Then at Lily. "Your daughter." Samuel answered quietly. "Yes." Ethan almost laughed. "Of course. The insolence was hereditary. You're fired too." Lily's eyes flashed. "Then I'll leave." She turned. "Lily." Samuel caught her arm. His face had gone pale. Not because he feared losing the job. Because he knew something she did not. Something that had begun 30 years earlier with a crying woman, a locked office, and papers that were never supposed to survive. Ethan watched the silent exchange between father and daughter. Again, something bothered him. Samuel was afraid. But not of unemployment. "Actually," Ethan said slowly, "she can stay." Lily turned back. Samuel's expression became alarmed. Ethan smiled. Your father can keep his position too. No, Lily said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You just lost the privilege of deciding. He stepped past them and walked toward the mansion. At the top of the stairs, he stopped. And Lily. She stared at him. My study needs cleaning, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Then he disappeared inside. Lily looked at her father. Why did you stop me? Samuel watched the door through which Ethan had vanished. Because we're not ready. For what? Samuel did not answer. That evening, in the small gatehouse where Lily had grown up, she found him staring at an old photograph. Lily recognized her mother immediately. Grace Carter had been beautiful. Lily remembered her mostly through fragments, the smell of cinnamon on Sunday mornings, a soft voice singing while folding laundry, a hand brushing hair from Lily's forehead when fever kept her awake. Grace had died when Lily was 10. Cancer. At least that was the part of the story Lily understood. But there was another woman in the photograph. Ethan's mother. Margaret Whitmore. The two women were young, perhaps 25, standing beside each other near a lake. They were smiling like sisters. Lily picked up the photograph. You knew Mrs. Whitmore. Samuel quickly reached for it. Too quickly. Lily pulled it away. Dad. Put it down. Mom knew her. Samuel looked exhausted. Your mother worked for her. You told me Mom worked in housekeeping. She did. Then why do they look like friends? Samuel said nothing. Lily studied the photograph more closely. Around Margaret Whitmore's neck was a silver pendant. Lily's breath caught. She reached beneath her blouse and pulled out the pendant she had worn since her 18th birthday. The same oval shape. The same tiny, engraved willow tree. Dad. Samuel stood. You should sleep, you start early. Lily blocked his path. You told me this belonged to Mom. It did. Mrs. Whitmore is wearing it. Samuel's face tightened. Some questions are dangerous because the answers have been waiting longer than the people asking them. What does that mean? Leave it alone. He walked into his bedroom and shut the door. Lily stared after him. For the first time in her life, she wondered whether everything she knew about her parents was only the safest version of the truth. At 6 the next morning, Ethan was already in his study when she arrived. He sat behind a massive walnut desk, reading financial reports. You're late. Lily checked the clock. It was exactly 6. No, I'm not. 5:55 would have demonstrated enthusiasm. And 5:50 would have demonstrated desperation. His eyes lifted. She smiled politely. Where would you like me to start? He leaned back. You enjoy this, don't you? Cleaning. Provoking me. I don't wake up thinking about you, Mr. Whitmore. The answer irritated him far more than it should have. He pointed toward the shelves. Everything comes down, every book dusted individually. Lily looked at the enormous library. Hundreds of books. And when you finish, polish the floor. Anything else? The windows. There are 14. I can count. She said nothing. Ethan returned to his papers. For the next 4 hours, Lily worked without complaint. He expected sighs. Nothing. He expected anger. Nothing. At one point, she climbed a ladder to reach the highest shelf. A book slipped. Ethan instinctively rose. Lily caught it before it fell. She glanced at him. Were you worried about me or the book? The book is a first edition. Of course. She returned it to the shelf. Ethan sat down, annoyed by the warmth rising in his face. The truth was that for one split second, he had imagined her falling. And the thought had frightened him. He hated that. So the following day, he assigned her the ballroom. Then the guest wing. Then the silver room. Then the greenhouse after a charity dinner left it overflowing with discarded flowers and broken decorations. Lily completed everything. Never cheerfully enough to please him. Never miserably enough to satisfy him. She simply endured. And endurance was difficult to punish. 2 weeks passed. Ethan began noticing things he had no business noticing. Lily always saved one bread roll from lunch. One afternoon, he followed her far enough to see her carrying it toward the gatehouse. But she stopped beside the laundry building and gave it to Maria, an elderly cleaner whose blood sugar had dropped. Another evening, he saw Lily leaving through the staff entrance with a pharmacy bag. Samuel's medication. A few days later, he overheard two maids discussing how Lily had quietly paid $20 toward another worker's bus fare after her son became sick. Ethan told himself none of it mattered. He had known generous people before. Most of them made sure photographers were nearby. Yet Lily behaved as though kindness was something that lost value when witnessed. It unsettled him. One rainy afternoon, Ethan walked through the servants' corridor and heard laughter. He stopped. Lily was sitting on a crate beside 11-year-old Jacob, the chef's son, helping him with mathematics homework while waiting for her shift to resume. "You can't subtract 79 from 52, Jacob complained. "You can," Lily said. "You'll get a negative number." "Exactly. Negative numbers are stupid." Lily laughed. Ethan had never heard that laugh. For weeks, he had seen only her guarded expression. Now her face seemed transformed. Young, warm, beautiful. He remained around the corner longer than he intended. Then Lily glanced up. Their eyes met. Her smile disappeared. Something inside him resented its disappearance. "Back to work," Ethan said. Jacob hurried away. Lily stood. "You know, children tend to respond better when spoken to like human beings. This is my house." "That doesn't answer what I said." "No, Lily, it reminds you that I don't have to." She stepped closer. "You remind people of your power very often." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And people who truly have something don't usually need to keep checking whether it's still there." She walked away. That evening, Ethan poured himself whiskey and stood before the window. Her words followed him. Because years earlier, someone else had said something similar. His mother. He had been 15. Ethan had just humiliated a classmate whose father lost his business. The boy had made a joke about Ethan's expensive shoes, and Ethan retaliated by telling half the school that the boy's family could no longer afford tuition. Margaret Whitmore had found out. She had entered Ethan's bedroom that evening and placed a photograph on his desk. It showed Ethan at 7, sitting beside a homeless man outside a diner, offering him half a sandwich. "You were kinder before you learned your last name was important," she had said. Ethan remembered becoming defensive. "He insulted me." "And that gave you permission to find where he was hurting and press harder." "He deserved it." Margaret had looked at him for a long time. "Be careful, Ethan." "About what?" "Every time you use power to make another person smaller, something inside you becomes smaller too." She died 3 years later. Car accident. His father rarely spoke about her afterward. and Ethan gradually became exactly the man she had warned him not to become. He finished the whiskey. Across the estate, light glowed from the gatehouse window. For some reason, he thought about Lily. The next morning, Samuel collapsed. Lily found him beside the gate, gripping his chest. "Dad!" Her scream brought two gardeners running. By the time Ethan came outside, Lily was kneeling in the gravel. "Call an ambulance." "I already did," Ethan said. She looked up. For the first time since meeting her, he saw fear erase every trace of defiance. "He can't breathe." Ethan knelt. "Samuel, stay with me." The old man's eyes fluttered open. He stared at Ethan. Then his hand suddenly clamped around Ethan's wrist. "Your mother." Ethan froze. Samuel struggled for air. "She wanted you to know." "Know what?" But Samuel lost consciousness. At the hospital, Lily paced the corridor. Ethan remained 30 feet away. He had driven behind the ambulance without deciding why. Perhaps because Samuel had mentioned his mother. That was what Ethan told himself. When the doctor appeared, Lily rushed forward. "Your father had a mild heart attack," he said. "He's stable, but he'll need careful monitoring." Lily pressed both hands over her mouth. Relief flooded her face. Then the doctor explained the medication changes. "The cost." Lily's expression fell. Ethan noticed. "I'll cover it," he said. She turned. "No. This happened while he was working." "I said no." "Stop being stubborn. And stop thinking money gives you ownership of everyone's emergencies. This isn't ownership." "Then what is it?" Ethan had no answer. Lily stared at him. For one strange second, neither spoke. Then Ethan said quietly, "Maybe I just don't want your father to die." The anger disappeared from her eyes. He immediately regretted sounding vulnerable. He straightened. "The company insurance will handle it." "Their business. Safer." Lily nodded. "Thank you." It was the first time she had thanked him. Ethan walked away before the effect of those two words could show on his face. Samuel returned home 4 days later. Against medical advice, he insisted on sitting near the gate every afternoon. But something about the heart attack had frightened him beyond mortality. That Sunday, Lily entered the kitchen and found her father feeding papers into the fireplace. "What are you doing?" Samuel turned. "Too late." Lily grabbed the metal box beside him. He reached for it. "Give me that." "What are you burning?" "Old records." She opened the box. Inside were letters, legal documents, photographs, and one envelope bearing Margaret Whitmore's handwriting. Lily stared. Her father's face drained. "What is this?" Samuel lowered himself into a chair. "Something I should have destroyed years ago. You've been lying to me. I've been protecting you." "From whom?" Samuel glanced toward the mansion. Lily felt cold. "Mr. Whitmore." "Not Ethan." "His father." Silence answered her. Lily sat down. Samuel rubbed both hands over his face. "Your mother and Margaret Whitmore became friends before either of them married. Grace worked at the estate, but Margaret never treated her like staff. When Margaret married Richard Whitmore, your mother stayed here." "Why?" "Because Margaret asked her to." Samuel stared into the fire. Richard was different in those days, or perhaps he was better at hiding what he was. "What was he?" "Greedy." Samuel's voice hardened. Whitmore Industries was struggling. Richard's father had left debts nobody knew about. Margaret's family owned land, investments, property. More importantly, she owned this estate. Lily looked toward the mansion. Mrs. Whitmore owned it. Before the marriage. Samuel nodded. She also inherited a large section of land west of the property. The cottages Ethan's father once demolished sit on that land. Lily's heart began pounding. You told Ethan they didn't belong to his father. They don't. Then who owns them? Samuel looked directly at her. Legally. He hesitated. Ethan. Lily frowned. But he doesn't know. No. Why? Because Richard made sure he wouldn't. Samuel reached into the box and removed a document. Margaret discovered her husband was moving money from trusts created for Ethan. She planned to confront him. She also changed her will. Lily stared at the papers. What does my mother have to do with this? She witnessed it. The answer seemed to change the temperature in the room. Samuel continued. Margaret feared Richard would destroy the new documents, so she gave copies to Grace. Lily looked at the pendant around her neck. And this? Margaret gave it to your mother the night before she died. Lily stopped breathing for a second. The night before. Samuel nodded. She said if anything happened to her, Grace should take the evidence to an attorney named David Collins. What happened? Margaret died the next day. The fire cracked. Lily remembered everything she had ever heard about the accident. Rain. A mountain road. Brake failure. Tragedy. Was it really an accident? Samuel looked away. That frightened her more than any answer. Dad. We never proved otherwise. What happened to Mom? She became afraid. Richard knew Margaret had been meeting someone before her death. He questioned staff. Your mother denied knowing anything. Samuel's voice broke. For years, she kept the documents hidden. Why didn't she go to the police? With what suspicion? Copies of financial records, a will Richard's lawyers could challenge. We had no proof he caused Margaret's death. Samuel stared at the flames. Then you were born. Lily understood. She was protecting me. Yes. When she got sick. She wanted me to tell Ethan when he was old enough. Lily shook her head. He's 32. I know. So why haven't you? Samuel looked toward the mansion again. Because Richard turned his son into someone I wasn't sure Margaret would recognize. That sentence stayed with Lily. So did another question. Why had Richard suddenly decided to demolish the cottages? What was he afraid someone might find there? 3 nights later, Lily found out. She was passing Richard Whitmore's office when she heard voices. Richard had returned from Europe that afternoon. Lily stopped when she heard her father's name. You should have gotten rid of Carter years ago, Richard said. Another man replied. Lily recognized Charles Bennett, the family attorney. Samuel hasn't spoken. His daughter works here now. She knows nothing. You're assuming. Lily moved closer. Richard's voice dropped. If Margaret's original papers still exist, that girl may lead us straight to them. Lily's blood turned cold. Then what do you want done? Bennett asked. A pause. Search the gatehouse. Lily backed away. A floorboard creaked. Silence inside the office. She ran. The next morning, she told Samuel. Within hours, the metal box was gone. Samuel refused to tell her where he had moved it. If they search here, they must find nothing. Then we should give the papers to Ethan. Samuel shook his head. He's not ready. How do you know? I've watched him become his father. Lily thought about Ethan kneeling beside Samuel in the gravel. About the hospital. About the boy tutoring session. About the sadness that sometimes crossed his face when he thought no one was looking. No, she said slowly, not completely. Samuel stared at her. Be careful. With Ethan. With what you want to believe about him. But the warning arrived too late. Because Lily had already begun seeing the man beneath the armor. And Ethan had begun seeing her everywhere. At breakfast, he wondered whether she had eaten. During meetings, he noticed when she crossed the hallway. At night, he remembered arguments they had hours earlier and invented better responses. It became ridiculous. He was furious with himself. So he became colder. One evening, during a dinner for investors, Ethan noticed Lily serving champagne. A guest named Bradley Turner watched her longer than Ethan liked. You, Bradley said, snapping his fingers. Lily approached. Bring me another glass. You still have one, sir. Bradley laughed. I asked for another one. Lily replaced it. Bradley deliberately knocked the glass. Champagne spilled across her uniform. Several guests laughed. Oops, Bradley said. Lily's face reddened. Ethan stood. The room quieted. Bradley. His friend grinned. What? Apologize. Bradley blinked. To the maid. To Lily. The use of her name changed something. Lily looked at Ethan. Bradley laughed nervously. You're serious. Ethan stepped closer. Completely. Bradley muttered an apology. Lily nodded and left. Later, she found Ethan alone on the terrace. Thank you. He looked out at the garden. I dislike people embarrassing my staff. Lily smiled faintly. That's interesting. What? You met me while embarrassing my father. He exhaled. I suppose I walked into that one. You usually walk into them. He looked at her. She was smiling. So was he. Neither noticed immediately. When they did, the moment changed. The night air seemed suddenly intimate. Lily looked away first. Ethan's voice softened. Why aren't you afraid of me? I was. He looked surprised. The first day. Terrified. You didn't look terrified. My mother used to say courage isn't the absence of fear, it's deciding something else matters more. Ethan went still. My mother used to say that too. Lily's eyes lifted. What? Almost exactly. The pendant beneath Lily's uniform suddenly felt heavy. She stepped backward. I should go. Lily. I'm working. She disappeared inside. Ethan watched her leave. For the first time, suspicion entered his fascination. Who was she really? That night, he searched old employee archives. Grace Carter. Housekeeping staff. Then personal assistant to Margaret Whitmore. Ethan stared at the screen. Personal assistant. He had never known. He found a photograph. His mother stood beside Grace. Around Grace's neck was the pendant Ethan had seen Lily wearing once when her collar shifted. His pulse quickened. At nearly midnight, he went looking for her. He heard voices near the conservatory. Lily. Samuel. Ethan stopped outside the partially open door. You have to tell him, Lily whispered. Not yet. His father knows we have the papers. Ethan froze. What papers? He heard himself whisper. Inside, Samuel spoke. If Ethan learns everything before we have legal protection, Richard may destroy him. He deserves the truth. He may lose everything. Then maybe everything he owns was never truly his. Ethan stepped through the door. Lily gasped. Samuel stood. Ethan's expression was terrifyingly calm. What papers? No one answered. What does my father know you have? Samuel sighed. Ethan, don't. His voice cracked like a whip. For 34 years you worked for this family. My mother trusted you. Now I hear you discussing secret documents and my father. He turned to Lily. And you. Pain flickered across his face. You knew. I only learned recently. Knew what? Lily looked at Samuel. Samuel slowly sat. Your mother changed her 3 weeks before she died. Ethan laughed once. Disbelief. My father handled her estate. Yes. He would know. He did know. Samuel's eyes held his. He destroyed the original. Ethan's face changed. You're lying. I wish I were. Samuel told him everything. The diverted trusts. The West property. The hidden documents. Grace's involvement. Margaret's fear. The suspicious break failure. Each revelation stripped something from Ethan. No. He shook his head. My father loved her. Samuel's eyes filled with sorrow. Perhaps in the way men like Richard understand love. You're accusing him of murder. No, I'm telling you your mother was afraid of him. Ethan looked at Lily. You believe this? I believe the documents. You've seen them. Yes. He looked betrayed. Something inside Lily broke. Ethan, where are they? Samuel remained silent. Ethan slammed his fist against a table. Where are they? Xavier, give them to me. No. Ethan stared at him. Then he laughed bitterly. Of course. He turned to Lily. You came here for this. She froze. What? You became a maid in my house because your family was searching for leverage. No. Don't lie to me. I took the job because Dad's medical bills were drowning us. And you expect me to believe none of this mattered. I didn't know. He stepped closer. How convenient. Lily's eyes filled. You know what? Keep your suspicion. Lily. No. Her voice shook now. You want everyone to be corrupt because it gives you permission to remain cruel. If everyone has an angle, then you never have to admit some people actually care about you. The words struck him harder than she knew. You don't care about me. Lily went silent. And in that silence, Ethan found an answer he was not prepared to receive. He stared at her. Lily's eyes lowered. Samuel stood slowly. I think both of you have said enough. Ethan walked out. But sleep never came. At 2 a.m, he entered his mother's old bedroom. It had remained mostly untouched. He opened drawers he had not touched in 14 years. Photographs, scarves, letters. At the bottom of a jewelry box, he found a note. Ethan recognized his mother's handwriting instantly. My dearest Ethan, if you are reading this as a man rather than the boy I still know, I hope life has taught you something wealth never can. People do not become small because they own little. He stopped. His vision blurred. The letter continued. There may come a day when you must choose between preserving what our family appears to be and becoming the man I believe you can be. Ethan sat on the floor. For the first time since his mother's funeral, he cried. Not elegantly, not quietly. He cried like the 18-year-old boy who had stood beside a coffin, wondering why the only person who ever expected goodness from him had disappeared. At dawn, he went to find Lily. She was gone. Her room was empty. Her uniform folded neatly on the bed. Samuel's gatehouse was empty too. On Ethan's desk lay an envelope. Inside were copies of Margaret's will, bank transfers bearing Richard's authorization, a letter from Grace, and a note from Lily. "Ethan, you wanted the truth, here it is. My father and I are leaving because staying has become dangerous. I don't know whether your father caused your mother's death, neither does my father, but I know she feared what he was becoming. There is something else you should know. She never stopped believing in you. Maybe that is why my mother protected these papers for so long. Please don't become the man your mother was trying to save you from. Lily." At the bottom was an address. David Collins, attorney, Boston. Ethan sat motionless. Then the study doors opened. Richard Whitmore walked in. His father looked elegant, controlled, irritated. "Where is Carter?" Ethan slowly raised his eyes. "Gone." Richard relaxed slightly. "And the girl?" "Gone." "Good." That one word told Ethan more than any confession could have. He placed the documents inside a drawer. Richard noticed. "What's that?" "Nothing." His father studied him. "You've always been a terrible liar." Ethan smiled faintly. "I learned from you." Richard's face hardened. "What have they told you?" Ethan stood. "Enough." For several seconds, father and son stared at each other. Then Richard sighed. "You're emotional. My mother was afraid of you." Richard's expression barely changed. "That old story. So it's true. Your mother was unstable near the end." Ethan felt something inside him snap. "Don't. You were a child. You remember what you were allowed to remember." And Samuel, a servant who grew too comfortable. Grace Carter. Richard's eyes narrowed. There, tiny, almost invisible. Fear. Ethan saw it. "What happened to my mother's will?" Richard walked toward the bar. "Legal matters were handled legally." "Did you destroy it?" His father poured a drink. "You've built a remarkable career, Ethan. Do you understand how much of that depends on this family's reputation?" "That isn't an answer. It's the only answer that matters." Richard faced him. "You think fortune is clean. You think companies are built by people holding hands and telling the truth. Everything you have exists because someone was willing to make decisions weaker men could not." Ethan stared at him. His mother's words returned. "Every time you use power to make another person smaller, something inside you becomes smaller too." For the first time, Ethan saw his father not as enormous, but diminished. "Did you kill her?" Richard's glass stopped halfway to his lips. He did not answer. And somehow, that was worse. Within 24 hours, Ethan contacted federal investigators, private forensic accountants, and David Collins. Within 48, the Whitmore empire began cracking. Hidden accounts surfaced. Fraudulent transfers. Forged documents. Trust manipulation. The investigation into Margaret's death reopened after forensic evidence suggested maintenance records for her vehicle had been altered. Richard Whitmore was not immediately charged with her death. But the financial crimes were enough. Ethan cooperated fully. Against every advisor's recommendation. Whitmore Industries' stock plunged. Board members resigned. Reporters camped outside the gates. Friends stopped calling. Investors who once laughed too loudly at Ethan's jokes suddenly claimed they barely knew him. And Ethan let it happen. Because for the first time in his adult life, losing something felt cleaner than protecting it. There was only one person he could not find. Lily. Samuel had gone to stay with relatives. David Collins refused to reveal their location. Weeks passed, then months. Ethan sold 3 of the family's luxury properties to compensate employees and beneficiaries affected by his father's fraud. He transferred the West cottages into a community trust so the families could remain. He established a medical fund for long-time estate workers. The mansion became quieter. Not because fewer people worked there. Because Ethan had finally learned not to make everyone tense when he entered a room. One afternoon, Maria the cleaner found him carrying his own coffee cup into the kitchen. She nearly dropped a plate. Ethan frowned. "What?" "Nothing, sir." "You're laughing." "No, you aren't." Maria smiled. Miss Lily would faint. His smile disappeared. "Do you know where she is?" Maria's face softened. "No." Then she added, "But if you find her, don't show up with money." Ethan looked at her. "What should I show up with?" "The truth." 3 days later, David Collins called. "I can't give you Lily's address." Ethan closed his eyes. But Collins continued, "Samuel has a cardiology appointment tomorrow in Providence." Ethan was already reaching for his keys. The next afternoon, he saw Lily sitting outside the hospital. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a blue sweater. No uniform. No tray. No mansion behind her. Just Lily. She looked up. Every emotion passed across her face. Surprise, fear, anger, and something softer she immediately tried to hide. Ethan stopped several feet away. "I'm not here to take you back." "Good. I'm not here to offer you money." "Even better. I came to apologize." Lily said nothing. Ethan swallowed. The man who had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without blinking suddenly struggled to form a sentence. "I humiliated your father because he challenged me." Lily watched him. "I punished you because you embarrassed me." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I accused you of using me because believing that was easier than believing you cared." Her expression changed. He stepped closer. "I was cruel to people because cruelty made me feel impossible to hurt." Lily looked away. "And did it work?" "No." A sad smile touched his face. "It mostly made me impossible to love." She looked at him again. "You came all this way to tell me that?" "No." "What else?" Ethan exhaled. "I came to tell you my father has been indicted." Lily's hand rose to her mouth. "On the financial charges?" "Yes." "And your mother?" "The investigation is ongoing." "I'm sorry." "So am I." He sat at the other end of the bench. "My mother wrote me a letter." Lily remained quiet. She said there might come a day when I'd have to choose between preserving what my family appeared to be and becoming the man she believed I could become. And I chose. Lily's eyes met his. "Did it cost you?" "Almost everything." "Do you regret it?" Ethan looked at her. "No." Something eased in her face. Then Samuel emerged from the hospital. He stopped when he saw Ethan. The two men stared at each other. Ethan stood. Samuel walked closer. "You found us." Eventually, Samuel nodded. I heard what you did with the cottages. They were never my father's. They were yours. Ethan shook his head. They belonged to people who had spent their lives making them homes. Samuel studied him. Then slowly, he extended his hand. Ethan looked at it. Once that hand had opened a gate for him. Once he had humiliated the man attached to it. Now Ethan took it with both of his. I'm sorry. Samuel squeezed his hand. I know. Ethan glanced at Lily. She looked suspiciously close to tears. But forgiveness was not romance. And Ethan had enough respect for her now to understand the difference. He did not ask Lily to return with him. He did not declare that he had changed and demand she reward him for it. He drove home alone. 2 weeks later, Lily received a letter. Not flowers. Not jewelry. A letter. I won't ask you to trust the version of me I say I'm becoming. I'll let you decide whether my actions deserve that trust. She read it 3 times. A month later, another arrived. Samuel says you always wanted to finish nursing school. I was going to offer to pay, but Maria specifically warned me that you would throw something at my head. So instead, I will simply say I hope you go. Lily laughed. Samuel looked over his newspaper. What? Nothing. 2 months later, Lily enrolled. Ethan did not pay. But when the community hospital announced that a major anonymous donation had funded scholarships for low-income nursing students, Lily suspected him. She called. Was that you? Was what me? The scholarships. No idea what you're talking about. You're a terrible liar. So I've been told. She smiled. It was their first conversation that lasted longer than 5 minutes. Then came another. And another. Months became a year. Ethan visited Samuel occasionally. Sometimes Lily was there. Sometimes she was not. When she was, Ethan never pushed. He learned her favorite coffee. She learned he hated thunderstorms but pretended not to. He told her about standing outside his mother's hospital room as a child. She told him about shaving Grace's hair when chemotherapy began taking it in patches. He confessed that after Margaret died, he had spent years trying to become someone grief could not reach. Lily told him the tragedy was that grief had reached him anyway. It simply came disguised as anger. You always do that, Ethan said. Do what? Say something devastating in a calm voice. It saves time. He laughed, and Lily realized she liked the sound. 2 years after their first meeting, Ethan took her back to the estate. Not as a maid, not as an employee, as his guest. The iron gates were open. Samuel no longer worked there. Ethan had officially retired him with full benefits, though Samuel complained for 3 months that retirement was a fancy word for people deciding an old man is in the way. They walked toward the garden. Ethan stopped beside the exact place where Lily had confronted him. Here, he said. What? This is where you ruined my life. Lily stared. I ruined your life. I had a perfectly functional system. Humiliate people, frighten employees, insult gatekeepers. It was efficient. She laughed. He reached into his coat. Lily's laughter vanished. Ethan, I know. He pulled out not a ring, but an old photograph. Margaret and Grace. The lake. The pendant. Lily took it carefully. I found another copy. Ethan looked at the women in the picture. They saved us, you know. Lily swallowed. Our mothers. Mine preserved evidence, yours preserved the truth. He looked at Lily. And somehow, long after both were gone, they forced two stubborn people to stop becoming what pain was turning them into. Lily's eyes filled. Ethan reached for her hand. I loved you before I deserved to tell you. She looked at him. And now I'm hoping I've learned enough to ask instead of assume. Then he knelt. This time he did have a ring. Lily covered her mouth. Ethan smiled nervously. Lily Carter, the first person in years who looked at me and saw neither my money nor my name, only the man I was failing to become. Will you marry me? She stared at him for several seconds. Long enough for Ethan's confidence to collapse completely. Then Lily smiled. On one condition. His eyebrows rose. Anything. You never call my father the gate man again. Ethan laughed. Deal. And never tell anyone I fell for you first. You did. Lily's eyes widened. I'm withdrawing the proposal. She laughed through her tears. Yes, Ethan. His smile disappeared. Yes. Yes. He stood and wrapped his arms around her. For a moment, neither noticed Samuel standing 50 feet away. Then he cleared his throat loudly. I assume someone was planning to tell me. Lily turned. Dad. Samuel approached, pretending to be offended. Ethan shook his hand. Samuel ignored it and pulled him into a hug. When they separated, the old man studied Ethan. Your mother would have been proud. Ethan's eyes immediately filled. He looked toward the mansion. For years, he had thought inheritance meant buildings, companies, accounts, land. Now he understood. The greatest thing Margaret had left him was not wealth. It was a warning. And the greatest thing Samuel had guarded was not a gate. It was the truth. Richard Whitmore was eventually convicted of fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and conspiracy. Investigators never obtained enough evidence to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he deliberately caused Margaret's fatal accident, though the altered maintenance documents cast a shadow that never disappeared. Ethan visited his father once in prison. Richard sat across the glass partition, older and thinner. You destroyed everything, Richard said. Ethan looked at him calmly. No. His father frowned. You did. You spent decades building something that could only survive if everybody kept lying. Ethan stood. I just stopped lying. Richard stared at him. You think that girl made you better? Ethan paused. No. Richard looked surprised. She made me realize I had a choice. He turned away. For the first time, Richard Whitmore had no power to call him back. Years later, children would run through the western cottages that were once marked for demolition. A community clinic stood near the entrance, partly funded by the trust Ethan established and managed by a nurse named Lily Whitmore. Samuel volunteered there twice a week, mostly because retirement still offended him. On the clinic wall hung the photograph of Margaret and Grace beside the lake. Beneath it was a small plaque. To the women who understood that truth may sleep, but it does not die. Sometimes visitors asked Lily about it. She would smile. It's a long story. And sometimes, when Ethan came to pick her up at the end of the day, he would stand by the clinic gate and deliberately hold it open for her. Lily never missed the irony. The great Ethan Whitmore opening gates now. He would bow. I learned from the best. Samuel, sitting nearby, would shake his head. But he always smiled. Because the arrogant young man who had once arrived, intending to humiliate a poor gatekeeper, had finally understood what his mother had tried to teach him decades earlier. A person's position can tell you what job they perform. Their clothes can tell you what they can afford. Their house can tell you something about their circumstances. But none of those things can tell you the size of their heart. Ethan had once believed power meant making people lower their eyes. Lily taught him that real strength was becoming the kind of man people never had to lower their eyes around. And the woman he had once dismissed as nothing more than a poor maid became the person beside whom he wanted to spend the rest of his life. Not because she rescued him, not because love magically erased what he had done, but because she forced him to see himself clearly, and when that reflection became unbearable, Ethan finally chose to change. He had come to the gate, intending to teach a poor man his place. Instead, the gatekeeper's daughter taught him his. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more powerful and interesting stories like this one. If you believe no human being deserves humiliation simply because they are poor, employed as a maid, a cleaner, a driver, a guard, or any other position society sometimes looks down upon, then let your support speak loudly. Respect costs nothing, but it can restore a wounded person's dignity. Wealth may disappear, titles may change, and power may pass from one hand to another, but character follows us everywhere. And sometimes, the person we overlook today may be carrying the very truth, kindness, or love capable of changing our life tomorrow. So tell us in the comments, did Ethan deserve Lily's forgiveness after proving that he had truly changed? Would you have trusted him again? And most importantly, if you were Lily standing at that gate on the first day, would you have had the courage to defend your father, even if it meant losing everything?